Hello there, and welcome to Delightful Dissent. Now, today it's episode 13, and I'm with Patricia von Papstein. Welcome to the show, Patricia.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. It's really pleased to have you on. And today we're going to be talking about the assumption feeling ambivalent is a sign of trouble. And this is a really interesting one for me because ambivalence and feeling and emotion are huge parts of the work I do with other people as well. And it's really quite a rich topic, and it's a big assumption, this one, particularly in the world of business. So I really hope you can pick up some interesting stuff from our conversation today. If you're new to the show or you haven't seen too many episodes, Delightful Dissent is really a show about challenging deep assumptions, the kind of implicit assumptions that hold us back and that we don't even realize are there and can trip us up. The goal is to give you an example of something that might be holding you back in your life and to share some new ideas and new thinking. But it's also to really get this practice out in the open, share people who are doing this amazing work, and give you the ability, show you how you might want to do this for yourself. Because ultimately, I'd like everyone to be out there challenging assumptions and helping us think better. And the show is called Delightful Dissent because, it is actually dissenting. We're challenging the normal way people think. We're challenging the normal way stuff is done. And that can often get you into trouble. The delightful part is really how we can do that challenge in a way that people enjoy and makes things better for everyone, rather than just causes more argument and more friction. So it's really a bit of an ambivalent idea in and of itself, which is great for today's topic. So this show is genuinely live, and stuff may go wrong, so please do bear with us. It's also the case that we cover some challenging stuff, and we might cover some triggering things for you, and there might also be strong language. So just be aware that that may be the case. This is really a conversation, and it is about engaging, and I'd really love for you watching live to share. And if you're watching live, you can leave comments on YouTube and we'll be able to see them. We can bring them into the conversation or answer any specific questions if that's appropriate. So please do engage and let us know what's going on for you and how you're relating to this, because this really is a bigger conversation than just the two of us. I'm really pleased to have Patricia on the show today. We first met a few months ago at a community building event, and I was really it's a bit of an alternative thing. And actually, it was one of my previous guests, Lana Yelenlev, was organizing it. So it's kind of a nice linked thing. And Patricia and she's made some really interesting comments that on something we were discussing with a really fresh and different angle. And then we had this incredible joyful conversation afterwards about this kind of the intersection of technology and the fiercely human. And it's not a space that many people work, so I was really excited to get her on the show today. But that's enough of me talking. Could I ask you to introduce yourself a little bit, the kind of work that you do and the kind of people that you like to work with, please?
Mm-hmm. Hello. I have lived already many different lives. In the present, I'm doing a consultancy business called Bliss to Business. And there I work with capital owners and business owners on appreciating their unconventional talents and making them show up in their products. Yeah. And for capital owners, this is most important. Where do they invest? Yeah, that it's not the boring mainstream.
Mm. And is there anything in particular that really, in clients that you particularly like to work with? Any particular things beyond founders in general, or is there, what makes someone that you really love working with?
Yeah. What's most interesting to me is because I'm working incognito. Yeah, it's not hitting the drum, come here. So people must find me, and they're working with contradictory expectations and the idea of that there is a full spectrum of possibilities for a product development. this is always risk and fun. Yeah.
Great. I think that does lead us really well into the assumption, which is feeling ambivalent is a sign of trouble. And I think for me, the contradiction is part of the ambivalence and gives rise to ambivalence. But first of all, could you really say a little bit about what this means to you, what the assumption means to you, and where does it show up for you?
Mm-hmm. I found it most playful because usually we work with stereotypes or with principles and so on. And ambivalent, by its expression, means both sides count. It's not like, as you look up in the dictionary, that you feel unsure, confused, doubtful, yeah, debatable, and so on. Yeah. In the expression in it says it's ambivalent means, aha, there's more than one thing around. And yeah, usually we think that we are in trouble, that it weakens our decision making, that it's poisoning our ability, that people in front of us think, wow, yeah, she or he is, you can't rely on them, and so on. And so I was so curious in cracking this nut and bringing it to another assumption at the end of our conversation.
I think for me, it is a really, really big one, and that sense that first of all, it's unhelpful to feel in yourself, but second of all, that expressing ambivalence is really a problem in a leadership position, particularly. If you're the slightest bit unsure, then there's definitely that's not a good sign in a leader. And I think for me, that's a really deep assumption, and something that we often make. We often use confidence as this heuristic for how much someone really knows, which we've spoken about in previous episodes, and it just isn't true.
Yeah, I agree. And so the challenging thing about it is, okay, emotional ambivalences, mood swings. Yeah, we all think that this belongs to mental illness. Yeah, and in business, nobody wants to show up with a mental disease. So, as an input, a factful input, I have found the original article. Can you see this? Of Mr. Bleuler, Eugen Bleuler, a Swiss psychiatrist. In 1910, he was the first one to name ambivalence, emotional and decision-making ambivalence, as part of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia meaning mind split. And from there, we started that we think ambivalent must be something crucial for the business. Yeah, because it's a pathology. And I think we are more ahead now after 100 years. Yeah, we can skip this doctrine and look what are other possibilities to approach ambivalency.
I think that the bringing in of emotions in that is a really important one, because again, there's another linked assumption here that the work is all rational and we know exactly what we're doing and it's all kind of demonstrable and everything. But almost all interesting work is about judgment and expertise and a felt sense of what's going on, and that's reported to the consciousness largely through emotion. There's a lot more going on there than just this really fixed, strict kind of way of seeing the world. And I think for me, thinking that if we do think in these terms, if we start to feel into the world, to assume that is on some level madness, is schizophrenia is a really, well, it's interesting to know that it was written down and said, because it definitely feels like a deep belief, but it's not a very well-founded belief. And I think for me, that's a really important part of that is we're looking at something quite deeply embedded in the way that we think we should show up at work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we have, in our language, we have typical expressions about it. Yeah, if you're ambivalent, you are a complainer, a drama queen, a hothead, yeah? All negative approaches. And so it's not you are a playful person, yeah, you are a maverick, you somebody who looks behind curtain. And so it's about the next step in leadership and product invention, to show with all these different degrees and gradations of emotions. Yeah.
Mm.
So perhaps for the audience, Matthew, if you think, okay, anger, yeah. So there are so many different levels of anger, resentment, annoyance, outrage, yeah. So it's so different in its graduation. And if you have contradictory feelings, people at the moment say, I'm totally confused, yeah. And this total, I think it's too much, yeah. It's about the graduation. I feel confused, and perhaps as well you're jealous, and as well proud, and as well. So this edition, I think, is the spice in the soup.
I think it's a very interesting way of wanting the world to be, to have everything kind of completely good and bad. It feels very much like, well, very early stages of development in Freud's model and splitting. If we're approaching our entire lives, or certainly our entire working lives, in turning it, say that's good, that's bad, these are kind of permanent, enduring things, that's always good, that's always bad, and that's all they are. We have a very limited way of actually dealing with anything more than the very simple. We really have to, we can't engage with the complexity. We can't actually start working with it as well, and we can't explore into it.
I think we can, yeah, we can engage with uncertainty and everything, but we are trained to avoid it, yeah. So it's much easier to say, okay, here's a quick fix, yeah, don't think too much, or okay, action brutalism, yeah, what we have, disrupted, break through, either or, yeah. So it seems much more energetic. And what I like with the ambivalence, for me, it's more like the dissonance in music. Yeah, you have to explore it and come out on different traces than you thought that the whole crowd is running to. Yeah.
And I think for me, it's really helpful to start really exploring what ambivalence is and what it feels like, because I think it's a word, because it isn't something that we're kind of often speak about engaging with in explicit terms. So I think that idea of discord in music, and the tension that sets up, but the tension that can be resolved in a really positive and joyful way, and for me, it's also kind of dramatic tension, narrative tension. It's like, well, I think the narrative's going that way, but there's this evidence over here as well, and there's this person saying this, and so it sets up and creates this tension to be resolved, or where there is a resolution possible. And so I think
Alfred Hitchcock would call it suspense, yeah. So that it's an interesting part. And imagine a CEO of an established company would now say, "Oh, I'm ambivalent about the next quarterly report."
And suddenly everyone's paying attention to quarterly reports, which I bet they don't do very often otherwise.
Yeah, because we all know we separate time in 3 months distance, time horizons, and this would be quite refreshing, yeah, that somebody does not pretend to be clear. And so I promised Matthew that I will show 2 examples of companies and how neglecting emotional ambivalence leads to a very specific kind of leadership culture and product innovation. So, yeah.
Which one would you like to show first?
Let's start with Nike.
Great. Okay. So this is, sorry, I'm just going to make this slightly bigger so you can see it, hopefully. And then, so would you like to talk us through this?
Yeah. So what you see here is fly, ease, go. Yeah, that's the first hand-free shoe. Yeah. So at first sight, it's kind of okay. That will simplify life, and so it's a beautiful product innovation. But if you look deeper, yeah, then this shoe is about, it sucks the foot, yeah, doesn't leave it out, and then any feeling of the ground, any particular idea of, okay, now I want to get rid of it, but only gradually, it's not possible. So Nike is celebrated in mainstream media, that this is a breakthrough for footwear. What I think is, if you look at emotional ambivalences, yeah, when do you want to go barefoot? Yeah, and it's not always about easing the foot experience. It's much more about making it more and more interesting. Yeah?
Connecting.
So
And
for me, this is a kind of, it's a nice playground, but for me, this is not about innovation.
It looks more like a pair of slippers to me. It's very comfortable, and I think comfort is part of this. And also, what strikes me, and we were talking about the kind of acting and doing things. Nike's motto or tagline is "Just do it," and I'm not sure that's always a healthy approach to the world. Maybe you need a pair of slippers to protect you if that's how you're going into the world. You need some padding, because you're not sensing into things first.
And especially the slogan addresses, okay, don't be so doubtful. That's quite interesting. But I think to go further is, sometimes I need doubts. Perhaps should I buy this? Sometimes it's kind of, okay, what are the consequences? Hey, slow down the decision-making process. And a product like this, for me, is not inviting the whole spectrum of emotions in customers. It's much more okay, this is the solution.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate solution. Stop, period.
It's all about convenience, all about, doing things and not having to think about it, not having to engage with it.
So perhaps we go to the second example.
Sure.
This is more about leadership. Yeah, this is a slide of Netflix leadership culture, and what you can see is honesty always. And Netflix has become famous for its keeper test. Yeah, should a leader manager keep an employee, and is the employee worth it? So Netflix says it's all about fully formed adults that they are approaching as employees. And so if you are keen on working with your emotional ambivalences, I thought, how boring. Yeah, imagine no childish persons, no persons with frictures, no persons with failures, no persons with whatever. So it's in the leadership culture, again, it's a company that sells this idea of perfection. Yeah, here the adult people come in. And as an interesting part, Matthew, Miss Patty McCord, who has invented this, has already been fired. Okay, so this gives you a little taste of how emotional ambivalency help us to not fall into the trap that a simple solution or a reasonable solution is innovation. Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting. Again, two companies that are really held up to be highly innovative, and it's a difficult word, and I think there are different kinds of innovation. There's the kind of doing things more efficiently, more easily, but then there's the exploring the edges and doing things in a different way entirely, which opens up a huge new realm of possibility. And that space is always going to be challenging. It's always going to be in the messy and the edges. And then when we cut off our ability to even be aware of what is there, or begin to be aware of what is there, there's no way for us to do anything else than kind of pretend that we all know and pretend that we're all certain.
Yeah, this brings me to the thought that emotional ambivalences, because it's about the real feeling. It's not only in the head, that it brings us to the idea: do we really need it? It's not about, oh, that's fashionable, or that's quite forward-looking, or this is sustainable, or whatever. The ambivalence says, okay, if I go into my greed feelings, if I go into my pride feelings, if I go into my curiosity, and I grab at all these different emotions, what does my ambivalence, not this balance, but this contradictory feelings, do they say that this product is important? Whew, yeah, and if we allow customers this, yeah, emotional ambivalences to be expressed. Wow, this will be a revolution, I hope.
I think it's really interesting to look at, that there's paradox in what we're doing, and when you have an intention, and paradox is a huge part of this. And kind of when we were having the conversations planning this, it's kind of where we started from, actually. And the idea of maybe not Nike, but someone like Patagonia, who have a clearly defined purpose around changing, making the world, making the environment better and protecting the environment, yet are selling clothes into a market where there are already too many clothes. And how they engage with that is really, really interesting. Because there is a problem there, and that they're aware of, and that they're happy to be front and center about, and is part of their conversation with the people that work there and that engage with them as a brand. So I think there's something really different there going on, and it's a very different approach, and it does feel much more in this space of paradox.
Mm-hmm. So what you can see with the Patagonia leader, it's not about tokenism, yeah. So telling a little bit, okay, we are against gender differences. We are into not wasting material. Yeah, this is what Patagonia claims. But what's interesting there is they are not afraid of addressing different needs of their customers. Yeah, so it's not only about the fashionable fleece jacket.
And I think that really gets to the heart of quite a lot of why ambivalence is important, is that we always do have multiple needs to try and satisfy in the same situation. And when we just focus on one, well, that feels like a lot like compulsion, like addiction almost, to me, when there's just one overall, this huge craving that we need to satisfy, and that we can't actually think about that in the wider context. And we can't say, well, I want to satisfy this, but then there's this over here and there's this over here. And it prevents us, first of all, from really making a responsible decision. And second of all, it prevents us from behaving in a nuanced way. And the way that we meet that need might alter depending on context. But instead, it's like, well, it's the same thing over and over, and I do the same thing over and over. And that's a very, very different way to relate to the world. And I think for me, an awful lot of the way that we work, and really built into the structures of work, is this assumption that we can do the same thing over and over and over again, and it will get us the same reward over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. And this leads to three things, I presume: stupidity, bitterness, and neglect. In German, we say Verwahrlosung. This means that we don't take care, the couch potato effect. Yeah, because something is not very interesting to the body and not to the mind. And I think playing with ambivalences is about, you address your stupidity. I say, better engaging with different emotions than just thinking, okay, I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, across all of the emotions, and really that the couch potato is a really interesting thing, because it's kind of, that strikes me again as kind of distraction and numbing. It's like there's this thing that we're trying to get away from. There's something there that we're trying to distract ourselves from.
I'm not that sure that we have to get away from it. It's there too. Yeah? This need or this yearning for comfort, convenience, and so on. But we have to spice it up with opposite feelings that we say, for instance, what about my jealousy? Yeah. What about my grief? And to contrast it, and bringing this idea of okay, if I'm as a business leader, do I allow my employees, do I allow my customers, do I allow my investors that they are ambivalent about the mission and the progress of the company? And this is about not questioning all the time the purpose, but keeping it alive. Yeah.
I think that's a really important point. Is one of the responses to any kind of potential contradiction, any kind of potential paradox or ambivalence, is to kind of go after it and try and question it and solve it, and erase it. And
Yeah,
what's really
or
interesting,
perhaps let me contradict this, or perhaps just leave it there. Yeah, in terms of the spectrum, not to overcome it. Yeah, so because this is what we are trained into: overcome the ambivalence, overcome the difference. Yeah, now we are into diversity. Now we are into whatever. Yeah, and these small, really tasteful differences. I think if you go for training your ability to enjoy emotional ambivalences, you come up with very, very interesting ideas of what could be the future of the company. Yeah, it's perhaps a mobility company then changes into a logistics company, because the ambivalences say, wow, time over, time out for plain mobility. And this is what we could learn from Nokia. Yeah, when they had these shoes thing, and then they turned into smartphone production. Yeah, the pivot thing. So if we would allow that the origin is an emotional ambivalence as a driver, that's much more interesting than rationalizing it. Okay, this is what the country or the world or the globalization needs now. Yeah, all these heuristic things in the head.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and I think that idea of what is needed now is a really interesting one. And that urge, again, it comes back to that urge to respond, and I think being able to hold contradiction, hold ambivalence, and see what it resolves into is a huge leadership skill, a huge life skill in general, but specifically, a leadership skill. And without being able to do that, we do just grab at things, grab at the first thing that comes across. And that doesn't let us change. It doesn't let us alter course, really. We're just going to keep doing and doing and doing. And that's not a helpful way to really relate to the world for me. And I think my own experience of this is very much that's been when I've been caught in this loop, which I definitely have, because it's out there and it's kind of how you're expected to behave in many workplaces. I've done things that really just were meaningless, weren't very helpful, didn't really move anything forward for me, didn't really help the people I was trying to help. All of those things, that kind of dissociation, we lose an awful lot when we cut this off.
Yeah. So I was just thinking whether I raise a practical experience from myself now. so how did I get along with emotional ambivalence step by step for making a decision? And as you know, Clubhouse is around now. Yeah, this new social media. And first, I felt disgust. I allowed myself to disgust it, not because I'm a Twitter or LinkedIn favorite person, but it was about, okay, who invented this? It was hyped by investors to make a company more attractive and then come in to attract investments. So this feeling of disgust, it was not just a little anger, it was disgust. Yeah, kept me alert. After this first phase, I went into envy. I said, wow, why was this not invented by me? Yeah, so this is really a cash cow. So I allowed myself to envy this. Yeah, and say, wow, so perhaps I should follow through and engaging there. And then I became curious, gave it a trial, and thought, okay, this is for me, it's not just product cosmetics. It's not that breakthrough in social competencies. And then I felt regret, total regret. So imagine now this cocktail of 4 emotions, step by step, yeah, but usually they are there at the same time. It brought me to the decision, okay, I will lead by silence. I will not join in. So the spectrum of emotions allowed me to make a good decision in terms of, okay, what it's like on the long run. Is it profitable not only in the moment, but really profitable, yeah, in terms of, is this future shaping, and refraining them from participating in Clubhouse, yeah. It's kind of, okay, I'm out, but I like it.
It's interesting. I as an Android user, I'm kind of excluded from having to make that decision at all. So it's an interesting position to be in. But there's for me, there's something really interesting in there, and it's a theme that we've spoken about before around, what it really means to be able to be responsible to things and to be able to actually have choice, and actually be able to make a choice, and that absolutely requires the ability not to do. We can't be responsible if we have to act on whatever we discover all the time. It's a very, very kind of, for me, it was kind of one of those like, oh, right, okay, and actually quite comforting in a way to say, well, okay, we don't have to act on everything that isn't quite right, everything that doesn't quite make sense to us, every little bit of cognitive dissonance that's going on in our head at any one point. Is that we don't have to work through all those things and solve them all. We can just let them be. And I think certainly in a work context, a lot of that for me has been really letting other people have their own as well, allowing myself to appear contradictory. Well, I don't necessarily believe it's contradictory, but other people see a certain aspect of me. And I spent a lot of time kind of stage managing and trying to produce this very clear, singular image of me and my work and what I do. And I realized it was really tiring and not really, very constraining, very limiting, and it wasn't really working anyway. So I think that idea, that we don't have to, we cannot do, and that's actually part of an active choice, an active decision, and that can come from engaging with stuff is a really important part of this. And for me also, around the timing, is I'm not saying I'm never going to do anything about this. I'm saying right now, I don't need to do anything about this. It isn't the time to act.
Yeah. Well, this brings me to another subject, and this pretenderism around emotions. So I think an honest emotional ambivalence is about experiencing which different emotions come up, and to really express it and name it. And usually we have this pretenderism, for instance, what you see at the moment with sensorial branding. It's a fashionable expression. Yeah, you go into a hotel and so how you can fake a coziness, yeah, by the smell, by the colors, and so on. So what we see here is it's brushing over all these ambivalences, in this case of hospitality, and bringing up an issue. Okay, this is nice, this is sound, this is beautiful, and this means it becomes shallow. So what I like about emotional ambivalences is that they keep us alert. They say, oh, there's something wrong. And it doesn't mean that you go into this always complaining or love to do some pretentious business. And as well, I think it helps us to go away from going into crime. Because I think every business owner is into this, how can I really have a true business, yeah? And at the moment, cheating people is kind of, it might be the beautiful idea of the day. So how can you cheat people nicely? And I think customers' emotional ambivalence, to train them in that, yeah, it's like a protection shield. So you don't sell your data easily because you see, okay, no, I'm not convinced. Yeah.
I think sensory branding is a really interesting thing because it's a very powerful thing. You know, we are sensing an awful lot more of the world than we're consciously aware of all the time. You know, there's a huge amount of perceptual filtering, and that's really something that we don't have a lot of direct control over because it's based on really quite deep models. And things like, you know, taste and smell association, the particular, you know, sound and things that never really get through to our conscious can have a huge effect on our decision making. And certain fast food brands have known, you know, well, I say known this, they've through experimentation discovered that this makes for very, very successful fast food products, put it that way. And again, it becomes this compulsive thing. You know, it's like the cue response. It's very Pavlovian to build that. And I think how we maybe fight back is too strong a word. I think it's work with that almost. You know, the environment's giving us this, and what do we want out of this? Where's us in this? Is a very different way of taking this on, because we are pulled in all these different directions. You know, we are going to be, if we're out in the world, we're going to be exposed to this, and we can't, even if we might be able to resolve it, everything that's kind of current for us now, which perhaps maybe is why meditation can feel so good sometimes, because we've kind of got through everything. But the moment we open our eyes again, the world's going to be coming back in. We're going to have all this stuff to deal with again. So I think there's a really interesting question about how we engage with this and just how we see it, you know, how we work with it, how we frame it.
Mm-hmm. So I want to bring back something into this leadership issue, yeah. And I looked up requirements for being great, yeah. So again, no contradiction, great. And so the skills that are demanded there are insatiable curiosity and hunger to learn. Leadership is meant with getting people to buy on a vision. Entrepreneurial spirit, usually in psychometrics, yeah, if you test startup founders or employees about their abilities to do business, entrepreneurial spirit is about the drive to get things done and not over analyze. So what you see here, for me, even in how we try to identify unconventional talents in people, it's very ordinary what we are looking for. Yeah, it's not about, it's more about mental toughness than about mental flexibility. It's more about curiosity in terms of learning, yeah, but not curiosity in a term what you said before. No, I don't need to learn it. I skip it here and so on. Yeah.
I think there's a huge amount in there. I think that's a really, really interesting. And yeah, I see that model of the kind of ideal business leader all over the place. And I've seen it, I've been trained to try and make me that in the past. Fair bit. And there's a huge amount of courses and stuff, materials out there trying to bring this to people. But I think...
Do you have any idea why it's so resistant against change?
I think what's interesting is it is change resistant in and of itself as like a set of ideas. It's all about carrying on and ignoring everyone else and ignoring your sense and ignoring what's coming in, just having an idea and just doing that and kind of. So it's almost an evidence resistant, and when I say evidence, rich empirical evidence rather than necessarily demonstrable evidence, but it's kind of a resistant approach. And I think there are times for that. And this is one of the big challenges, but there are times when it's absolutely catastrophic. And being able to discern the difference is a huge part of this. We don't want to be completely blown to every single thing and distracted by every single input in our environment. We would never get anything done. We wouldn't actually be able to meet our needs or help other people. But equally, we need to be able to take the feedback and understand the feedback and work with it and adapt and change. And I think flexibility is a really interesting one, because quite often this approach, this linear approach, is very brittle. I talk quite a lot about this in my own work, and this idea that yes, being hard can be good because it resists something, but it fails catastrophically. It's brittle, it snaps, and once it's snapped, it's never going to be back the same again. Whereas greater flexibility gives you a completely different approach to the world. And yeah, you can change and you can move around, but you can keep centered. You can kind of keep anchored to something. And it's just a very different way of approaching how we're trying to do things and what we're trying to do. And for me, the idea that we're kind of forcing ourselves on the world, all of those things that you mentioned were about compulsion. Compelling other people to see how I see the world. It's kind of tricking yourself into being compelled. It's like, for me, it speaks of a lack of trust in oneself and one's ability to really perceive what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So if we look at trust in its archaic dimension, yeah. So in mythology, we have this Janus god in Roman or ancient Italian mythology, and we have Brahma in the Hindu mythology. And Janus looks forward and backwards, and Brahma looks in all four directions on the horizontal level. So for us in Western thinking at the moment, Janus means tricky, means if you are ambivalent, you're close to crime. And that's why you are in trouble, yeah? You can't do honest business when you're doing this. So this sidestep into mythology leads into, so we have to liberate all these thoughts about double-faced is bad and whatever. So this will happen. Okay, it's just looking forward and backwards at the same time. It's looking into negative and positive feelings at the same time. It's simultaneously playing. Think of triplets of emotions, not only the either or. Think about boredom and what have I written down here? Greed, euphoria, and pride meet. Yeah, what kind of product would they do together? So a totally different approach to innovation. Yeah. So if we would address people with this, I'm sure that the outcome are not rabbit hutch design in architecture. It would be something different. So yeah, this is why I think I will undermine the resistance against emotional ambivalences by making people really curious and yearning for this idea of, wow, this is something beyond.
Absolutely. And I think, for me, certainly in the past and with people I speak to, there's a huge feeling that there's a fear of engaging with this stuff, that if we engage with the negative side of things, if we engage with the messy side of things, we kind of bring it into being. There's again a lot of mythological significance around the role of naming things, and that then brings them to life in a way that they weren't otherwise done. And you give this kind of notional thing actual life when you name it. But the other side of that is actually really counting on ourselves, trusting ourselves to be able to engage with it and to be able to work with it, kind of play with it and dance with it, whatever that is. If we can't engage, if we can't sense it and can't start working with it and kind of talking about it, how can we ever expect to make it any better? We're just hoping that we're kind of hiding from it and hoping that it goes away at best. And for me, if we are talking about leadership, a lot of the role of leadership is actually to courageously lead into something that really matters to us, is to put ourselves out there in a way that, for whatever reason, others do not. And that we all have a domain in which we can do a really amazing, unique job of doing that. It's not that leadership isn't actually kind of this special, rarefied thing for these special, rarefied people. Different people may express it in different ways, and some of us may do it through founding big organizations that create a lot of change. Some of us may do it in much more modest ways. Mm-hmm. But the point is that it's a personal thing, and it's a sensed thing, and it's about actually really engaging with what is difficult, what is uncomfortable, and working with that. Yeah, please do.
I think it's a collective thing. Because as a business collective, whether we are Westerners or Easterners, Northerners or Southerners, we have decided to agree upon a neglect of emotions, or at the moment, what's interesting with the whole movement about emotional intelligence is about now we train each other to check out what emotion can be identified in another person. And then, so, okay, you are sad. How can I address your sadness? And then, yeah, I follow through with
how can I make you happy is kind of the which is a really toxic way of looking at emotions for yourself and for other people. And you're completely right about the connectivity of emotions. And I think I'm kind of taking that as read, but you're right. It's not something that actually that many people think about. And really, for me, it's that we're sensing into a context. We're always sensing into a context. We aren't devoid of that. There isn't a separation. So the interpersonal context and the emotion involved in that is absolutely between people. It doesn't originate in us. It's about that relation and that overlap.
And it bounce back into the individual, that you say, okay, if the organization or the whole collective of business demands from me that I'm straight, that I'm directed, that I'm whatever, whenever I feel different, and maybe that I then get a burnout syndrome or whatever, but I will bow my head and agree that it's better to have no emotions. And I think the other side is wrong as well. it's not about no emotions or exaggerated emotions. So what really, sorry, made me a little bit vomit when I saw the video about the founder of Airbnb, who broke out into tears when he said that he had to lay off employees. And for me, this is inappropriate as well, because it's just to show that you are emotionally connected. And for me, this is pretentious. So I would better say, okay, if somebody is really into a grief, that's okay. But for me, was like studied, trained. It was on the surface. So, and with all these bots we will have now, where you have the surrogate of your leader position, you can show up whatever facial expression you are into. I think these are the next challenging points, that a normal approach, normal in sense of you show that you are weary, you show that you are undecided, is more attractive than all these sleek faces. Yeah.
Absolutely, and so we're coming to the end of the hour now. It's gone very quickly, and I think I like to try and wrap it up for people a little bit, because these are often very free-ranging conversations, and this was definitely one of those, which is lovely. But just to give people a bit of an anchor into the stuff that we're talking about, and one of the ways I like to do that is to think about what, as a result of this assumption not being true, as a result of us saying, okay, feeling ambivalent is not always a sign of trouble, what don't people have to do anymore? What can they stop doing? What can they stop worrying about? We have enough to worry about. So as a result of this, what can people stop doing? So
this is a question to us?
To us, yeah. I mean, for me, it's about, first of all, needing to jump to that resolution, for me, and also to really try and to be okay to hold ambivalence and to say, okay, it's ambivalent. And second of all, is to allow myself to kind of create ambivalence in others, to present something that might be ambivalent, that doesn't necessarily make sense or make full sense to other people, and to not worry, and not worry that by projecting that, by sharing that out in the world, that I'm, first of all, not being professional, second of all, gonna harm people in some way, all of that stuff. So yeah, so for me, I think it's which kind of two sides of the same thing, it's self and other. But yeah, how about for you? Is there anything that jumps out for you in that?
Yeah, not to worry. I think I would love to deeply bath into some worries, to allow ourselves, again, the contrast, allow ourselves, if we feel worried, for instance now, with the business future, approaching COVID-19 pandemic, and the whole twists we have to make, it's about bathing in worries. Sometimes could be very, very helpful. Bathing in these ideas of anger and rage and whatever. Yeah? This comes from experience with the special project I'm doing, Emergency for Business. And it's not about not worrying, because we are so trained in, we must be happy. We must distribute good feelings. So perhaps this idea of let me worry, let me doubt, let me, and then like Phoenix out of the ashes, come up, and so this would be my answer. Not play with the worries.
So we can yeah, that's great. So we don't have to fight the worry anymore. We can let ourselves play with it, let ourselves see where it goes. Yeah, I really like that, and I think it's such such a timely thing for the situation right now, and so much uncertainty and so much challenge. And if we can engage with it, we can actually do something positive about it. Whereas if we push it at arm's length, we just deny ourselves the ability to do that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So perhaps this is leadership evolution of a new kind.
Yes, yes, definitely. That ambivalence as a leadership. I don't want to say what I was going to say, because all of those words associate with all of the stuff we were talking about not doing. I was going to say competence, but I'm not sure there aren't the words for this yet, interestingly, for me.
And this is what we see. The language will change too. Yeah, it's beyond efficiency, competency, skill rewards, and whatever. So this will be quite interesting.
It's certainly going to be an exciting and interesting journey and exploration. So yeah, I hope that's raised all sorts of thoughts and questions for you in the audience. I think it probably has. It certainly has for me. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me by the normal ways. And if you would like to get in touch with either Patricia or I, we are exploring how we can do a bit more of this together and share some ideas around this and develop this, because this was a very quick overview of some stuff that really is very new. And I know it's a lot for people. It's just something that is hard to get a grasp of. So we're looking at ways to get into it a bit more, explore it a bit more, and help people through it. So if you have any thoughts in that direction, I would love to hear from you. So please do get in touch. The next Delightful Dissent episode, which is next week, is around kind of related assumption, and it's kind of magical how these happen. The next week's assumption is that I can enjoy my life when I am successful. Cool. So we're going to look.
So may I add something to our session?
Yeah.
You asked me the assumption. If I feel ambivalent, I'm in trouble, how I would twist it into a positive approach. So think about this paradoxical intervention. If I'm ambivalent, I am sound.
I like that. I might have to ask people in future how they would change their assumption towards the end. I think we might have to play with that in future. So that's great. So yeah, so really interesting. And yeah, this next week really does relate. How we feel about things, how we feel into things, how we feel good about things, and how we can place unnecessary, imagined conditions on the things that we're actually working for and trying to want. So yeah, thank you. That's so that's next week's session, and I'll be talking to David Papper about that. We don't have a date yet. It will be next week, but we're just finalizing exactly when that's going to happen. So we're working in our own uncertainty there. Thank you so much, Patricia, for joining me. I really appreciated today's conversation. I certainly learned a lot. It was very interesting. Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Namaste.
Namaste to you too. And yeah, thank you everyone in the audience for watching. It really is you that make the show possible and make the show interesting, so please do engage. Thank you for all your comments. We didn't get actually a chance to go into them directly, though I hope I kind of paraphrased and brought a few of them in at the end. We'll take them on and see what we can explore. So yeah, if you like this, if you didn't like it, if you feel ambivalent about it, please do go out there and share how you feel about it, good or bad or mixed, with whomever you think would be an interesting and exciting person to do this with. And go out there and make some delightful dissent of your own. Thank you and goodbye.